Welcome to our Bucky call for the weekend of September 2nd, September 3rd, depending on what continent you're on. And we've heard from Anne and from the Butlers and from Susan about them being in transit and not able to make it to this call. But here are the Three Musketeers inviting those who venture to join us as we do Buckminster Fuller Critical Path. And we're going to begin tonight actually on part 2, which is the beginning of chapter 4. And that's where we're beginning tonight. So, which is all about the disciplines of Buckminster Fuller. As he gets it, he's defined the problem so far in section 1. So he's about to define the solutions, I hope. And so I can come out of my massive depression. So he's going to define the solutions. So anyway, that's where we are. Manu, how are you feeling? And what do you expect to get out of today as we begin chapter 4?
I feel good. I feel blessed. Really, what we have here is that Bucky set the macro first. And that macro is still so relevant today. Now he's looking on to the micro. What is new? What is expliciting is self-discipline. Because he found that the environment in which we evolve influences us so much. So that's that's my anticipation to understand how he went about it, and then also try to define mine and apply them to better understand the unity of the macro, micro, and understand our environment and be able to be more effective, not only around me, but as further as I could. So that's my expectation. Joe, how do you feel? What do you expect?
I feel great. Thanks for being here. And thanks for having me as always. My expectation for today is to, we finished with the first part of the book. I think we got a really interesting perspective on both the economic and some of the technological breakthroughs the past century we've been focused on for the past few weeks. And now, like you, Manu, I'm really now looking to see what Buckminster Fuller's, how his principles are applied in the second half of the book. And I'm excited about that. So, yeah, I'm ready to get started. Steve, how do you feel? And what are you looking to take away from the day?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's a crazy time here where I am in the U.S. We're still, Utah was on, Salt Lake City was on environmental alert because of all the smoke that's in the mountains, because of our own fires, but the Canadian stuff is still influencing us in a major way. I haven't heard from Richard, but he's often on the calls, and he has been reporting. He's kind of in the thick of that. Some of the fires up north of him. He's in Calgary, I think, and there are fires up north of him that are very close to him that have caused a lot of stress and strain besides the fires in Hawaii. And so we're living in a strange time where, Bucky's really, he cautioned everybody about this spaceship Earth. And, here we are 40 years later, and we're now seeing some of these symptoms and manifesting in a major way. And of course, the Earth is resilient, and she keeps coming back, giving human beings another opportunity to make some changes. And so let's hope we do. I've kind of been looking ahead on this second section, and it's been frustrating to me how Bucky has done such a good job of reminding us about how all this technology that we've developed in the 100 years prior to Bucky has been utilized by the pirates to, even though there's a lot of ephemeralization going on, and so we're producing more and more with less and less resources, how the 1%, the pirates have been able to capture those extra profits, put it in their pocket, and haven't done it in a way that benefits all of the people on the planet. And of course, his assertion is that we're all billionaires, and it's just that we're not smart enough to utilize it, or we haven't taken the time to learn how to utilize it. And as a result, the 1%, the pirates are capturing those excess profits. So it's kind of this book, Critical Path, is kind of a wake-up call. And as I've looked ahead in the book, I see that he's basically saying, here's why you should listen to my answers. Here is all the things I've done. And frankly, I've been real surprised to hear what Bucky's done and what he's participated in. And we're going to be talking about that tonight. And so I'm very excited to that. And now here I am so engaged in this thing, I forgot to pull up the reading. So I'm going to be doing that right now. Any other comments or questions before we get started? Okay, cool. And I'm pulling up the book right now. Particles. Here's our reading, I think. Now that was part 1. So because I didn't want the Word document, I've been copying and pasting a PDF file into Word because it's easier to manipulate. And I want to keep the pages down to a minimum, and so far I haven't done that. Let's see what else is going on. Okay, here's part 2. I just brought up 2 of the wrong files, and here's part 2, and I'm going to do what I can. Okay, it says reading right there. Okay, good. And I'm going to take the word reading off of this, so I'm no longer confused. And I'm going to begin screen sharing right now. Okay. Now this is on page 121 and page 122 of the book. This is page 123. It's just a title page for part 2, and I think this is where we begin reading, is on page 123. Hang on, I'm going to get in a little bit closer.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so that we're not. Okay, cool.
Give it a shot.
Hang on. Yeah, and Joe, we ought to take turns reading, but it's up to you if you want to start and then and keep going,
Yeah,
as long as you're
okay.
comfortable, my friend. There's no requirement. Okay, so here we go. Self-disciplines of Buckminster Fuller, and here he goes. He's itemizing them and listing for us. So if you want to go ahead, let's go.
Chapter 4, Self-Disciplines of Buckminster Fuller. 1. My father died when I was 15. Darling, never mind what you think. Listen, we are trying to teach you. My mother said it. My school teacher said it. All grown-up authorities of any kind, the policeman, the druggist said it. Thinking was considered to be a process that is only teachable by the elders of the system. That is why we have schools, dear. Thinking was considered to be an utterly unreliable process when spontaneously attempted by youth.
Let's pause right before
Sure.
we go to. Let's talk about thinking for just a second here, because I think his point is that whatever you intuitively think about the situation is not sufficient, because we've got everything learned and we're going to hand you a package here. So I think that he's pointing out that basically authority tried to usurp the individual power to think. Is that what you guys are getting there?
The authorities try to do what?
They tried to usurp or take away the authority of individual thought. Right?
Mhm.
Is that what you're getting out of this? That's what I'm getting too.
Yeah, that it was an unreliable process,
Yeah.
that it was not something that was standardized where it was repeatable. And so, yeah, we became mechanistic and
Yeah.
and have, you know, we're structured as the way we are now.
Right.
Far different than that incentivizes any kind of creativity.
Right. And I just listened to an article, a couple of guys in a university here locally are writing a book on this new phenomenon that's happening called moral autonomy or moral authority, and how, in fact, because of social media, it's actually going a little bit too far. But there's a certain thing here where, you know, school said, you don't need to think about it. You need to learn this, right? We're going to show you the right way to do it because we've had Einstein, we've had Newton, and we know the right things to do. And so he's talking about this idea of taking away this concept of moral autonomy or moral authority. So there we go. I just wanted to bring that up. And I also want to point out that in Buddhism, thinking is a distraction. This is the other end of the perspective, that true knowledge comes from intuition, which is not limited by words. And we take these images and intuitions and we stick words on them. And as soon as we do, we no longer have the whole picture. That's the other end of the picture, and with meditation and awareness, you know. But Bucky was a big believer in intuition, and so I'm sure we're going to hear more about that. But I thought we ought to talk about thinking per se. Any other comments or
I
thoughts?
think it's
Thinking. Go ahead, Joe.
no, I just think that was an important thing to actually capture.
Yeah.
Because I think, no pun intended, that you know, that's what Bucky was all about, is
Right.
challenging conventional wisdom.
Yeah.
So,
Manu, are you
I
clear on that?
so
I think the big message that is coming is that of duality
Yeah.
between thinking and learning from the
Yeah.
environment. You have to think, being aware, and have learned of what the environment is, what are the principles. I think that's what goes. You know, you need both. You need to understand the environment, having to be intuitive, but you also need to be dissociative in order to rearrange and discover new utilizations of the things around you.
And I think, Manu, I'm grateful for that, because it's not that thinking is bad. Thinking needs to be done with the awareness of the process or system that's actually occurring. And I think that's what you're talking about, is there there's a duality to thinking, and that's a good point. Good. Anything
yeah,
else?
I mean, I just add really quickly, that was a very important point. You know, something that obviously you guys know that I focus on Stoicism quite a bit. But one thing is that that's not only the theory, but it's also the practice. And that's what thinking and learning are very much similar to. So learning from the environment that you're actually functioning in. So I think that's a very important point, is the practicality of this. It's both, you know, using your mind to create new ideas, but it's also making them real. So it's not just siloed and focused on one particular area. We know education often can be stuck in theory.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to criticize anybody.
No.
But you know.
Yeah. And his point is here, thinking was considered to be an utterly unreliable process. So he's establishing that was the first thing that they tried to drum into him, you know. Cool. Well, let's proceed. I'm ready for number 2 if you are.
Sure. 2, grandmother taught us the golden rule: love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as they should do unto you. 3, as we became older and more experienced, our uncles began to caution us to get over our sensitivity. Life is hard, they explained. There is nowhere nearly enough life support for everybody on our planet. let alone enough for a comfortable life support. If you want to raise a family and have a comfortable life for them, you are going to have to deprive many others of the opportunity to survive, and the sooner, the better. Your grandmother's golden rule is beautiful, but it doesn't work. Or it's Malthusian.
Yeah.
So number 4, knowing that my mother and relatives love me, I did my best not to pay any attention to my own thinking and train myself to learn what seemed to me the game of life. As you would train yourself to play football, the rules are all written by others.
Let's pause just for a second. Because I want to come back to your comment that you threw off there, Malthusian. And I notice when I throw that out to people, I get a lot of resistance. Number one, people don't know who Malthus was, you know. And number two, they don't know what Malthusian philosophy or strategy is. And I think it's important to talk a little bit about the fact that, having researched a little bit, you guys correct me, Malthus was actually a cleric for the Church of England, and he was considered the dean of the economics school of the East India Tea Company, which became, I think, Oxford University, one of them. And if you know who it is, maybe somebody could do a quick Google search. But Malthus was this idea that resources are limited, and that was the very foundation of the British Empire. They justified conquering the world and taking their resources because resources were limited. And they hooked that together with Darwin, who later came through, Charles Darwin, who basically espoused in his first book, and I forget what the name of his first book was. I'm counting on you guys helping me here. But the idea of natural selection, which has been interpreted to be survival of the fittest. What was Darwin's first book? But anyway, Darwin wrote another book later and tried to espouse sexual selection. And for the next 40 or 50 years of his life, tried people to get past this survival of the fittest and look at sexual selection and cooperation and as being more important than natural selection and survival of the fittest. But nobody listened to him because this Malthusian idea of scarce resources fit so well together with natural selection and survival of the fittest that it became the theme of the expansion of the British Empire and was later used by the American industrialists. So I think Darwin's first book was Origin of the Species, I think. What was it called?
What was it? Origin of Species, his first book? I thought you did one before that, but anyway,
it was on the selection of species. Something. Let me just see.
I'm looking it up now. Darwin, Charles Darwin. Theory of evolution by natural selection, of the foundation of modern evolutionary theory is built. Origin of Species, published in 1850.
Yes, Origin of Species, yes.
Published in 1850.
It was Origin. I was going to guess that, but I thought that was the second book.
And then Malthus, well, it may have been a second book, but it's the one for which he's tribute that he's most famous for. And like I say, his sexual selection argument was completely disregarded, and he was frustrated. And very few people know about that, in fact. Thomas Robert Malthus was a friar. He was an English economist, cleric, and scholar. And he was born in 1766 and lived until 1834. Which kind of overlaps with Darwin there. And his essay on the principle of population, written in 1798, was Malthus's governing thing. And it says here, he started looking at per capita production levels, and this idea of limited resources came out with him. So
yeah, he was counter. It was he He's countering like a lot of these individuals that we're starting to see during the Enlightenment that technology was actually taking us to new heights, and a lot of people were being optimists. And so, but what the most important thing I think that Bucky captures and Malthus doesn't is that not to look at things linearly. So the idea that this is the constant rate and this is the way, you know, I can predict exactly what our production of food is going to be, what our population is going to be, and our efficiency and everything's going to stay the same. And here are my numbers, and this is correct. And it's a much more nuanced approach that where, you know, essentially what Malthus missed was the entire industrial revolution. And so the idea that technology would actually increase the rate of production of food. Anyway.
I think two things. You know, first, one precision is that Malthus's Darwin's first book is actually an account of his trip around the world, especially at the Galapagos.
That's right.
In South America and the Pacific coast, where he was on the Beagle. The Beagle, that was the boat, and then he observed all of these strange, creatures that were there because they have been in a very particular environment, and they took different forms and different ways, into being the way they were. That was his first book. Second, Malthus was actual fact. You remember that the East India Tea Company was, let's just put one thing, tea in the 15th, 16th century was the best thing around.
I'm
Tea
drinking
and
it now still. I still drink tea.
Yeah. So, and remember that the East India Company was chartered, at least condoned, by the Queen. Right?
Yeah.
So the Queen was in as, how would you call it? She had interest in it without liability.
Yeah.
Because of insight as sanctioning that venture. And Malthus was the accountant, was the bookkeeper of everything that flew from these territories where the British traveled on the hills, actual fact, of the Dutch, right? And then how all of these ideas as in a repository in London. And Malthus was in charge of that. He was the manager of that. Now, his basic idea comes from the fact that people, they make assumptions, neglecting, sifting things around, neglecting other things. In other words, all other cultures in the world, everything else that wasn't tea or cotton wasn't worth anything. So that is the resource, and you build your world around it. Evidently, you are building your world on assumptions that are not sufficient to describe the whole system. And that is the natural consequence of that is that you'll reach a limit, a boundary. Remember, in order to find a solution, you have to define a boundary.
Right.
But in this case, it's the reverse. Because you have defined the space without telling the boundary, the consequence becomes the boundary is not enough. You have a population that is increasing and the resources that are limited. Therefore, you draw the conclusion it's not enough for everybody. And all kinds of strange rules, violence, and miseries follow on that. That's my big take of it. I don't think that Malthus came out with defining that the resources were limited. It was just the consequence of this limited analysis of what received and the belief of what the world is and what the world, what is worth in the world. And we're still having that today. I always say all of these manias that we have, there is an idea, you know, like the metaverse, right? Are we going to be in the metaverse completely without eating? Right?
That's right.
So if you suck out all what you consider as resources, that is what you are conscious of being able to use, and put it into the so-called metaverse, metaverse doesn't feed you.
Right.
It's just a representation. Right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah. The metaverse is imagined and felt not to be on its own, but to solve a problem, the problem of inequity in a distribution of resources, the problem of embezzlement, the problem of appropriation without justification of resources that ought to be retributive of the energy that is flowing, a reflection of energy that is flowing through a system, and how that energy is channeled. Does it make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Absolutely.
Yeah. You create a metaverse to store what you call is your resource that is relevant to you and things like that.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm doing a quick check here because I want to double check something here. Because I said something about the East India Tea Company and the fact that Malthus was head of that college that turned into Cambridge or I think I said Oxford. And it's funny because I read this just a while ago and had Malthus connected to it. And I'm doing some quick stuff right now. It says here, for instance, in 1647, the British East India Company had established 23 factories in India, including locations in Bengal, Madras, and Bombay. At this point in history, the main resources sought by the British East India Company were also going, oh, shoot, that didn't do it. I'm going to have to do some study on this. I'm going to report it next time because I think it's really important to understand. I will say, I can't connect those dots because Joe sent me a text saying he didn't see any connection there, and I'm going to connect those dots. I will say that doing a quick Google over here on my phone, I've been doing Google phone searches and computer searches. I will say that here's what I talked about: sexual selection instead of natural selection. Darwin suggested that such traits might evolve if they are sexually selected. That is, if they increase the individual's reproductive success at the expense of their own survival. Darwin noted that sexual selection depends on the struggle between males to access females. And this was an article that I read that I've had people challenge me at a couple of times. So next week, I'm going to report on Darwin's sexual selection and Malthus's connection with a college related to the East India Company. So I'm going to do some research on that because I think it's really important just for understanding the foundation of American imperialism, basically, because all that energy transferred over to, we have the right to rule the world. And right now, I think the U.S. has well over 100 military bases around the world, and that we have inherited that. The neoconservatives were the Bush and Cheney people who went into Iraq and, you know, went into Afghanistan, and this neoconservative effort is still about imperialism. So I want to be really clear on that. I don't want to spread any rumors, but I think it's really important to understand those roots in American history.
But it's a root all over the world. Thinking allow you not to become a stooge.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
you have to understand,
Right.
you know, when you say the American, right, people go like sheep, coral to go and fight.
Yeah.
But why are they fighting? For what?
Yeah.
And for who?
Right.
You understand what I'm trying to say?
They have
There
no,
is a
they have
system.
no idea.
There's a system that wins wherever there is war. Whether you are losers, you know, what I'm trying to say is the system wins. Let's say two country A and B are at war. The system has legs in both country A and country B.
Right.
They are just hedging their risk. They are always winners.
Yeah.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's a worldwide phenomenon.
I think that
Big corporation has interest. You'll be surprised, both in Russia and Ukraine.
Oh yeah.
And what they are looking for is to create debt. And the main characteristic of debt that people tend to neglect is that it's very difficult to forgive. It's very rigid.
Yeah.
You're right.
When debt was first created, there used to be a jubilee. So that every 100 years, all the debts would be forgiven so they could start over again. And we haven't figured that out here. Now, Biden is trying to forgive student debt in America, and it's creating a big, the conservatives are up in arms about it. We can't forgive debt. You know, debt, we live on debt. And
but the man who made the debt, student debt, more rigid was Obama and Biden. So all of that has nothing to do with, it has to do with those who have what you call equity in debt, in a debt system.
Yeah.
If I have equity, I don't want to give up my equity. Why should I give them?
Right.
Right. So I resist. And here I'm powerful, that is going to prevail.
Yeah.
And that's the reality.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm true.
Okay. And equity in debt takes away equity in other collateral, because eventually I set up economic factors, I raise interest rates, so you can't pay your debt back. So I get your collateral, because that's what you use to secure the debt. It's the way the pirates steal from everybody. I remember one time. Well, go ahead, Joe.
No, you go. I interrupted.
Well, no, we both talked at the same time. I remember I've been active in real estate, and I remember going to a big conference, and this young real estate guy came up to me, and he was all mad because the Native American tribes here in the Intermountain area they have the Navajo, we had the Shoshone, the Ute Indians there, and the Hopi Indians. They're all around in this Four Corners area here. And we were at a real estate convention, and this young kid was a real estate agent, was just totally excited. He was just mad because the tribes would not allow individual property ownership in the tribal reservations, which meant they couldn't get mortgages. And so he was so convinced that the tribes were poor because they didn't have mortgages. I had to say, dude, a 30-year mortgage is slavery. It's just a way to control people. You've got to change your brain. You know, free and clear assets are the only way to maintain wealth. And he didn't understand that. It's so funny how we're all indoctrinated into the debt economy, you know. And so let me see.
It's interesting that the name of a 30-year-old is, here we call it bond. In the US, we call it mortgages.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And mortgage is to gauge you till death, morte.
Yeah, mort gauge is French for a dead deed. A gauge with deed, and mort.
I gag you till death.
Yes, right. And if you don't pay it, what's that, Joe?
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, it means dead deed. And there was another point that I wanted to bring up, but I got all excited about these mortgages. So we'll talk more about this because I think it's so essential to understand how the very structure of the U.S. economy is based on slavery and debt. And most people can't get past that. And what Bucky's talking about, we've got to make that break. One of my big themes is on the fact that profit, we don't understand profit. Profit is what's left over. Well, there's nothing left over. A system uses all of its resource and energy. And when I take energy out of the system collapses. And I'm writing a white paper on that because I'm just really convinced about this. I think these principles are critical, and I hope those listening to this recording are getting the value out of this conversation, because most people do not get what Bucky is saying. And the reason why they don't get it is they don't understand these very foundational principles. So Joe has put some good stuff here in the comments. So I'm going to paste in that thing on natural selection. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was just going to say there's two thoughts that I had very briefly. As far as student debt is concerned, I was talking to somebody about this the other night. Yeah, I mean it's important to address the issue, but there's two sides to that issue. There's the schools that are billing them as well, so that has to be something that needs to be looked at to be balanced out. The other thing is that if the interest rates are at zero, profits really aren't worth all that much. I mean, so you might as well just put your money to work. It's even worse. So they're extracting money from the system, but they're sitting on money that's not accumulating any kind of interest either. So it's really just I don't know, pent up energy.
What is pent up energy?
Holding on. What do you call? I heard you using the word money many times. What is your definition of money?
It's the exchange of. That's a very good question. I would define it in my own terms as the exchange of energy.
Because the concept of interest and everything, is that fundamentally of currency? Is because you consider that away from you is losing value.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you have to be compensated to replenish. So in that way, depreciation and interest are similar. But in the case of depreciation, it's something real, right?
Right.
That is really, being chipped away by whatever. If you take your car, you store it somewhere. After a year, you want to restart it again, at least I think that the battery will be gone. Right. So we need to really understand that fundamental before going on to building onto something, because it can be very misleading to use a term and to build on a reality on top of a term. And people are there talking about that reality and drawing conclusions, which are not, actually, they're not talking about the same thing. And that's where you have that. I'm not saying that I'm a gold bug, but that's that dichotomy, because money is supposed to be a store of value.
Right.
Say nowhere what we call money stores value, because as soon as we issue it, it starts losing its currency, right? It's current, it's flowing. As you flow, there's friction, and there's friction value. That energy, intensity of energy that is flowing is decreasing.
Right.
So, in that sense, you are saying that one of the characteristics of money is defined by the intensity of the flow of energy that it translates.
to velocity.
All right. And then the other definition to get at money is minimize friction in that flow. And the two speak to the same thing. The two speak to flowing in a way, doing more with less, flowing in a way that you minimize the synergies, the friction, and then you carry a value, right, conservatively to the next use. Does it make sense?
I think this is important. When one charges interest on a debt, it basically takes energy out of the process. It extracts the energy.
Right.
So it creates entropy, which causes disorganization. That energy needs to go back into the system. And this is part of my white paper. Because just because I call it profit doesn't mean that the process that I've taken it from doesn't need it. The process is not allowed to move on to its next evolutionary step because I've just taken energy out of the system. It will disorganize. I've got to go ahead.
I was just going to say that, you know, the key is what is the system? Because, you know, you define your system. Say the dollar, you know, actually the dollar zone with a supply of something. When you say it goes out of the system, actually it's taken away, it's stolen from you, from one to the other.
Yeah.
Right? It's not fair because you don't see how you influence the settling of it.
Right.
Interest doesn't go anywhere like that. It just transfers from one account into the other.
Exactly.
Just write it.
Right.
So at a certain level, past a certain level, it becomes pure theft.
Yeah, I'm saying the same thing.
Past a certain level. So if the system were defined as spaceship Earth,
yeah,
and understood to be like that fairly, it
yeah,
wouldn't be a problem. Because
yeah.
it would be just be transferring from one part of the system to somewhere else where it's accountable.
In the system.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
But the thing is that it's transferring to one part to the other where, you know, the stakeholders in the origin no more have any say or any interest, any equity in where it's going to.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
And I'm going to translate this into a real example. I'm sitting there and somebody wants a house. So I take 400 trees, I cut down 400 trees, and I build a mansion for that guy. Well, what about all the other people that could have lived in the houses I could have built with those 400 trees?
Mm.
You know, I've got to go someplace else to get the trees for those people. And what usually happens is nobody goes and gets those other trees for the other people. They just build a mansion. So 1% of America lives in these mansions and the rest of us can't pay our rent. Right? It's it's the same thing. And I was a real estate developer. I built subdivisions and I've rehabbed houses. And I think I was more benevolent than other people because I would do things differently, but I didn't understand that there is whatever system I think exists, there's a bigger system. And when I take energy out of this subsystem, it actually takes energy out of the bigger system. And one needs to look at the whole. And this may sound strange and arbitrary to you guys, but back in the 80s, I figured out that 10% was a reasonable profit. So when I developed a project, instead of taking 90% out as my profit and giving away 10%, I decided I was going to live on 10% of what I developed and make sure the rest of it got reinvested. So if I developed a property and I made $100,000 profit, I would take 10,000 as my income and say, what can I do with this 90,000? How can I reinvest this back in the system to make sure that there's housing for everybody, not just for this guy that I did? Now, I never fully consummated that concept, but I developed the principle and I wrote articles on it. And to my chagrin, 40 years later, I'm looking back going, I could have had a VA. I see now how to implement that. But at the time, it wasn't, everybody thought I was crazy. They thought I should be keeping the profit. And I'm going, well, it's okay to make a profit, but let's have the profit honor the system. And the Lord said, give me 10%, and I'm the Lord, so I could make 10%. The rest of it should stay in the system. I don't know. That's kind of theoretical and arbitrary, and I'm sure you guys aren't understanding it, but that was my thought process. Go ahead, Manu.
I think you are saying something very important.
Okay.
There's a distinction between entrepreneurial investing.
Yeah.
That
Right.
is taking a risk on the
Right.
future, right?
Yeah.
So you saying that you take 10% of a thing and 90% you put it back on the table.
Yeah.
On other ventures.
Yeah.
Remember that if you are building more houses, you are building more houses not to stay there.
Yeah.
To allow some other person to stay there
Yes.
at a rent that is reasonable, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is the entrepreneurial thought. But the idea of investing today is sitting at a desk somewhere and playing with figures.
Yeah.
Investing has become no risk taking.
Yeah.
Just carving certain number of rules to protect you in such a way that you grow your pie without taking real risk. And that is a distinction between entrepreneurship and business, managerial entrepreneurship as you understand today. Because it's impossible
Absolutely.
to report quarter after quarter profit.
Yeah.
I don't know why we hang on to that.
And Bucky, and I think you heard me, Manu, which is amazing because most people don't hear me. They think I'm a crazy person, that I'm only going to take 10% of my profit and I'm going to leave the rest in to make houses for other people. Most people, they make their $1 million or their 100 grand, they keep the 90,000 and give away 10% and say, I'm a benevolent person. I'm living tithing like it's in the Bible. And now I'm going to take my $90,000 and I'm going to hoard it. And eventually I'm the 1% living in the tower and everybody else is struggling because I'm sucking money out of the system. I'm creating entropy. I'm creating chaos. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I mean, and I've brought this up here in the past. The idea that, where I just look at Amazon as a proof, as evidence as to when you have a vision for something and you're not making any profit. They didn't make profit for a very, very long time. And so they knew how to actually direct that money. They knew what was next, and they made bets on their infrastructure as a service cloud, and when nobody else was, and now that's one of their biggest business lines. My point being is that that you have to have a vision, and they weren't looking at it as as profit. They were looking at creating value. Now, at this particular moment in time, they're a completely different company. But I'm just saying that for many years that they were pretty much they didn't make any profit. So
let's look at it practically. The only risk that you really want not to take is that to die, to drown, right? You want to take every little risk every day in order to progress an idea, the concept, to something. You just want to make sure that it doesn't take you. That's the golden rule. As an entrepreneur, I cannot see a cliff and go jump over the cliff because I'm an entrepreneur. That's irresponsible.
Right.
I should try to make the steps that I require to discover things, paying some costs, right? Till I see the fruition or the big picture of something. If in the process I can't do it, I would have been happy progressing doing something. That's called living.
Yeah.
Without regret, because all of us, you don't know the day that you die. You don't know. But if you live in anticipation that, no, I'm not going to leave, I'm not going to move, and I wait until the day that something happens where you're not living.
Yeah.
Living is taking risk in
Yeah.
a responsible way.
Yeah. Very good. And this comes back to, I want to make this point very clear. I mean, when I say, okay, I made 100,000, I'm only entitled to keep 10%. That's my profit. The other 90,000, I reinvest into the system to make it work for everybody. Now, it makes it sound like I'm some kind of communist and I don't like profit. That's not true, because there's another side to this too, as this entrepreneurial aspect. And I know this is not going to ring true with everybody, but Elon Musk is my guy. Here's a guy who lives in a trailer, who could buy a big house on a hill, just like Bill Gates and just like Jeff Bezos. He doesn't build a big house on the hill. He had a lot of houses and some of them were pretty nice, but he sold all that, moved into a trailer, because he continually took his money and reinvested it when nobody else would. And as a result, there's Tesla Auto, which is the only successful car company that's come since, I don't know what, since 1910 or something, because other companies have come and gone. And he put when Tesla was ready to go bankrupt, he just put all the cards on the table. When SpaceX was ready to go bankrupt, he put all of his cards on the table. He lives on less than 10%, and he keeps the rest of his money invested. Now, you can say Elon Musk is not a perfect human being. You'd have to really work hard to prove that to me, but I'll grant you, he's not a perfect human being. But him and Ben Franklin are pretty dadgum close, as far as I can see. And he has the right idea. He continues to reinvest because he has a dream for all of humanity. And if every corporation in America reinvested based on their dream for all of humanity, we'd be living a Buckminster Fuller spaceship Earth in the proper perspective, but we're not, because we lose the concept of entrepreneurial, like you've said, Manu, and we turn into pirates, because
Yes.
that's what we think economy is. So
we lose the concept of investing.
Yeah.
What the definition of investor, what does it mean? Does it mean invest? That is, does it mean giving myself authority to go out there and try to fix it? Invest.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So I show my hand and I give myself that authority to go out there.
Yeah.
And we bastardize it, and that's what is prevalent. And it comes back to what Susan is talking about. What is the datum? What are we talking about?
Right.
We can talk like gongs. We can make a lot of gong noise, talking about thinking that we're talking.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
It's like these people who meet and start babbling and say they're speaking in tongues. What are you communicating?
Right.
And so, there are big throngs of people believing them.
Yeah. So it's okay to make $100,000, but I want to, I like this idea, invest. It's invest in the system, get the process, keep the process going. And most American industry is based on, all right, let's make a product and let's, just like Bucky complains about in Critical Faculty, we're going to make a product and we're going to take all the ephemeralized profit that we have, and we're going to hoard it. And we're going to put it in our bank account. And, and if you want to be as rich as me, you go do the same thing. United States business is based on piratism. It's based on slavery, except for a few people who have this really communal thing. I can't tell you how many people have ruined their lives over this idea is, I'm going to make $1 million and then I'm going to help people. That's it. That is the lie. That is not.
You make $1 million by helping people.
You make $1 million by helping people.
Yes.
Now you don't make $1 million.
If you help somebody solve his problem, the person will be very happy to pay you your price.
Absolutely correct.
Okay, let's read. Let's progress.
Well, except I want to come back to this one thing, because this point about Darwin is not well understood, and I just posted this in the chat here, and I want to read it because a lot of people don't read the chat. I want to read it. Darwin noted that sexual selection depends on the struggle between males to access females. Now, a lot of people go right back to survival of the fittest here, but open the mind and realize what he's saying here. He recognized two mechanisms of sexual selection: intra-sexual selection, or competition between members of the same sex, usually males, for access to mates, and intersexual selection, where members of one sex, usually females, choose members of the opposite sex, which is the majority of creatures on the planet do that. The idea of cumbersome traits evolving to aid males in competition during aggressive encounters was readily accepted by scientists shortly after Darwin's publication. In other words, they saw this idea of sexual selection as competition, one more time, and survival of the fittest. However, the idea of female mate choice was received with ridicule and was not seriously considered until 80 years later. In the 40 years since, there has been much progress in our understanding of how sexual selection operates. And this was the argument that Darwin put out was, look, if survival of the fittest was really the king, you would not see a peacock with a great big tail, because that great big tail only says to all the predators, come and eat me. But it wasn't about being eaten. It was about getting other peacocks to mate with them. And so, and people don't understand this. And because Malthusian economics was so embedded in imperialistic ideas, this idea of cooperation, this idea of sexual selection as more a cooperative process, which was really governed by females, was never accepted until 80 years after his death. So I think that that's really exciting, and I want to put that down here because a lot of people some people have already turned off this recording because they don't get it. Okay, any other comments before we go back to reading? And as we do go back to reading, by the way, I put the link in to this whole argument about sexual selection. I put that link in the chat so you can get there. I want to, as we continue to read, I want to, oops, where are we reading? We're reading right here. I want to come back up here to, Grandma talked about the golden rule, and Uncle said, forget about Grandma. She doesn't know what she's talking about, So here we go. I don't remember where we were. We on 4 or 5, Joe? Where were we?
Let me see. 4. Just
4 is
no, 5. We read football. We had to go on 5.
Yes, we did. Yes, yeah. The rules are written by others.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Let me just make.
Make your notes. Take your time.
Okay.
This is all about introspection, not about just reading the book. That we're here together in a community, and I love it. Go ahead, Joe.
5. Along came World War I. I did well in the Navy. I didn't have to make money with my ships. But when I entered the business world and had to make money over and above producing a good product, or when it had to be myself or someone else who was to survive in the system, I was a spontaneous failure. I was always sure that I could cope with hardship better than the other guy, so I would yield. 6. In 1907, at the age of 12, challenged by Robert Burns, "Oh, wad some power the gifty."
That's obvious mistranslation in the thing. Let me find it and I'll make it right. Keep going.
Gifty us to see ourselves, I'm assuming, as others see us. I sought to see myself as others might, and to integrate that other self with my self-seen self, and thereafter to deal as objectively as possible with the comprehensively integrated self.
Let's pause right there for a second.
One,
I just checked. That's
yeah,
exactly how it, that was exact translation. So the gifty gi, us to see ourselves as others see us. So this is exactly how the quote. So that's exactly right. And of course, Bucky here is doing alliteration and counter, perspective in order to make it really confusing. What he was saying, that's what most people are. We're confused. And I wouldn't mind if you read that again because it's very
sure.
complicated.
Number 6.
All right.
In 1907, at the age of 12, challenged by Robert Burns, "Awad some power the gifty gi us to see ourselves as others see us. I sought to see myself as others might, and to integrate that other self with myself, seen self, and thereafter to deal as objectively as possible with the comprehensively integrated self."
Now, listen, if anybody doesn't understand Bucky's writing, just understand that one sentence and everything becomes totally clear. Go ahead, Joe.
That's definitely needs to be diagrammed out.
That's right.
One of the other techniques I adopted for doing this was to keep a come as it may chronological rather than alphabetical or a categorical record of my activities. In 1917, age 22, as commissioned line officer in the U.S. Navy, I named the record the Chronophile. It consisted, and as yet consists, of all my to and from letters, programs, sketches, memoranda, doodles, etc., plus a few typical pills.
Let's
In
stop
1917,
right there. Let's stop right there.
Sure.
This is profound because he's saying that instead of keeping an alphabetical record, he kept a chronological record, in fact, gave it a name. And I would argue, having read this for the first time, that that's the problem with American politics today. Nobody talks about the facts in chronological order. If they did, they'd understand it. They don't. They pick and choose this thing and that thing. They take it out of context and then say, this is reality. And I think Bucky's point is here, there's no way to understand the facts unless they are listed chronologically, because in the chronological listing, one sees the systematic evolution of the concept or idea and sees when ideas are contra or are juxtaposed. When one takes the facts out of chronological context, it's easy to create a fiction. And most of us live in political fiction. Like right now, if you talked about the Ukraine war in America today, it's usually, well, what? You're for the America getting out of the Ukrainian war, so you must be pro-Putin. No. You know, if somebody looks at the facts about the expansion of NATO over the last 50 years and sees how the U.S. pledged to Khrushchev when the wall came down, not to Khrushchev, but to the other guy.
Gorbachev.
Yeah, Gorbachev. When the wall came down, we absolutely pledged to not expand NATO. And every year, there's been expansion to where we put missiles in Poland, we put missiles in Bulgaria, we put missiles, I don't know if it's Bulgaria, but we just kept moving missiles closer and closer to Russia. And the Ukraine, Russia has been invaded through Ukraine, I want to say 20 times in the last 200 years. Every time Russia's had a war, it's been through Ukraine. And this idea of Ukraine being a proxy war, and Biden has admitted the reason why we're in Ukraine is to deplete Russian resources. It doesn't make any sense. We've got Russia with their back up against the wall. And in fact, if one learns about the Minsk Accords, Russia agreed twice not to invade Ukraine. And Zelensky was elected as president on the campaign of not going to war with Russia, with a peace agreement with Russia. And yet, after Zelensky got elected, Biden told the British Prime Minister to go tell the Ukraine not to live by the Minsk Accords, but to have a war, to fight and resist Russian. We call it Russian aggression, but Russia taking over parts of Ukraine that were Russian anyway. Now, that's very controversial, but if one looks at the historical facts, that perspective begins to unveil itself. And if I just take this fact and that fact and choose my facts non-chronologically, it's easy to see why Putin is a bad guy and we need to win Ukraine. So I probably turned people off, but I wanted to say that. I think that's really important. I love this idea of a chronophile, right?
So what have you said in
Sorry.
terms? What have you said in terms of self-discipline?
In terms of
You can
self-discipline,
summarize it.
I see this as him evaluating himself as he's seen by others to try and integrate, and what it is to look at himself more objectively
and comprehensively.
and comprehensively. And that's a very important trait. It's something most people don't do. And by keeping the chronophile from a very young age, that you really start to be able to see patterns in behavior.
Right.
And so what Bucky was able to do was to tune in, essentially.
Yeah. To himself.
To himself.
Yeah.
Which is actually something that if we actually realized, just how skewed our perceptions are of ourselves, that's a very powerful tool. So
Okay.
I think that's CJ had a chronophile.
Yeah. Let me ask you again. I agree with you, Joe, by the way. But let me ask you, in the case of Bucky, how long did it take? Let me give you a clue. The books of Bucky, where he expounds on all the lessons that is learned, are all produced in the late 70s, shortly prior to his death in 1983, at the age of 87. You see that it took him about 50 years of that chronophile. So you could first see the scientific patterns. But in terms of social, it took long. So to me, the most important thing that I draw here is the importance as self-discipline to study history.
Yes. And
study history long enough in the past not to fall in the trap of just reading and ingurgitating, history as written by the victor. You understand? So Steve came to all the agreement that have been. If you really put those facts, it turns the general opinion of America on its head.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people.
Yeah.
Because you can see the provocations.
Yes.
From President Clinton.
Yes.
To Bush, to Obama, and to Biden. Yeah. So if you put yourself in the place of a guy, I'm not, as Steve said, kind of endorsing anything of a character of Putin. What do you do? If you were the US, what did the US do or was ready to do in 1961? With Bay of Pigs.
Oh, yeah.
what were the US ready to do? And that is the context.
Indeed.
And one of the rare guy in the US that is seeing things. Ray Dalio, I'm not here to, he says things, but his things are usually anchored in long history, long cycle.
Right.
He says, he realized that what he does, what he knows, is very little in comparison to what he doesn't know. And he knows that even things that haven't appeared, you know, that he hasn't experienced in his lifetime, and his lifetime today is like 75, right?
Right.
He knows that they exist because they happened in the past. And this is the way people deal with. Therefore, I try to take that lesson long enough into building the way I am going to kind of navigate this troubled time. The first thing that was done in the when war in Ukraine started was to blind all the media, right, into one narrative. If you wanted to understand something, you had to go on to Google, onto these things, to hear about independent analysts, what they are saying. And it's important. It doesn't mean you are taking side. It means that you're trying as a lizard to navigate the crit of a roof. You know, the top of a roof, you have a side like this. You are in there, you are looking here and there, trying to decipher what the reality is. Obviously, it's dangerous because you can be sniped, right? Somebody can shoot you because you didn't go into hiding into one phase. And that's the most important. That's what you call thinking. It's a risk that you take to try to assess and understand what is really going on. Otherwise, you just stay in a phase. And the phase is just a belief. A belief doesn't mean that it's real. It's just a belief that is conditioning your positions. And again, if you take this, education means to educe, to take out of, and expose it there for it to see what is real. And it's so difficult to be able to be objective, you know, just when things are happening. It's very difficult. But we just don't have that capacity. Maybe big systems, you know, people in control in Russia, in the US, they know what's going on. But we don't know. We just, you know, and the best for us is not to take side. Really.
I love it. Joe, do you have any comments there?
No, I mean, I think that Manu captured everything, and actually, I really like the idea of linking it to thinking. Yeah, because it's, well, we can, I'll have some takeaway about that a little bit later. In 1917, Anne Hewlett and I were married. In 1918, our daughter Alexandra was born. She contracted infantile paralysis and spinal meningitis and died on her 4th birthday in 1922. But in 1922 and 1927, I developed a manufacturing and building business designed and equipped for small factories for manufacturing new building components, and therewith successfully erected 240 residential buildings. But I failed to do so profitably and lost my friend's investment and became discredited and penniless. Coincidentally, with my failure in business in 1927, our second daughter, Allegra, was born in pristine health. Number 7, in 1927, at age 32, finding myself a throwaway in the business world, I sought to use myself as my scientific guinea pig, my most objectively considered research project, in a lifelong experiment designed to discover what, if anything, a healthy young male human of average size, experience, and capability with an economically dependent wife and newborn child, starting without capital or any kind of wealth, cash savings, account monies, credit, or a university degree, could effectively do that could not be done by great nations or great private enterprise to lastingly improve the physical protection and support of all human lives. At the same time, removing undesirable restraints and improving individual initiatives of any and all humans aboard our planet Earth.
Let's pause for a
Number
second.
8.
Let's pause for a second. He did not have a college degree. He designed.
No, he dropped out of Harvard. Oh, sorry. You know
That's
that.
right. Well, I mean, he designed houses, right? He built, how many houses did he build? 100,
200,
200.
240.
Yeah. But he didn't have he was an architect and didn't have a college degree. I think that he dropped out of Harvard. It boggles my brain. It boggles my brain. Okay, I just thought I would point that out. I'm ready to
No,
continue.
it is. Number 8, in 1927, I also committed all my productivity potentials toward dealing only with our whole planet Earth and all its resources and cumulative know-how, while undertaking to comprehensively protect, support, and advantage all humanity instead of committing my efforts to the exclusive advantages of my dependents, myself, my country, my team. This decision was not taken on a recklessly altruistic do-gooder basis, but in response to the fact that my chronophile clearly demonstrated that in my first 32 years of life, I had been positively effective in producing life advantage wealth with realistically protected, nurtured, and accommodated X numbers of human lives for Y numbers of forward days. Only when I was doing so entirely for others and not for myself. Further, chronophile observation showed that the larger number for whom I worked, the more positively effective I became. Thus, it became obvious that if I worked always and only for all humanity, I would be optimally effective. Number 9, I sought to do my own thinking, confining it to only experientially gained information, and with the products of my own thinking and intuition to articulate my own innate motivational integrity instead of trying to accommodate everyone else's opinions, credos, educational theories, romances, and mores, as I had in my earlier life. Number 10, I sought to accomplish whatever was to be accomplished for anyone in such a manner that the advantage attained for anyone would never be secured at the cost of another or others. Number 11, I sought to cope with all humanly unfavorable conditions, customs, and afflictions by searching for the family of relevant physical principles involved, and therewith through invention and technological development to solve all problems by physical data and devices that were so much more effective as to be spontaneously adopted by humans and thereby to result in producing more desirable lifestyles and thus emancipate humans from the previously unfavorable circumstances. I must always reduce my inventions to physically working models and must never talk about the inventions until physically proven or disproven. The new favorable to humans environment constituted by the technological inventions and information must demonstrate that new innate technology could now accomplish what heretofore could not be accomplished by social reforms. I sought to reform the environment, not the humans. I determined never to try to persuade humanity to alter its customs and viewpoints. Number
Pause
12.
right there.
I
Let's
sought.
pause. Because that's a lot of stuff. He's just, any comments on that, or, we can wait till our takeaways, but any comments on what you just
That
read?
is a lot of. I mean, I think that I mean, what I find to be interesting is that, he was, it goes back to thinking and experience, with the idea of his inventions and making them physically working models. And he never talked about them until they were proven.
Yeah.
The other thing is, that I really, I think there was, if you go up a little bit, there with invention and technological development to solve all problems by physical data and devices that were so much more effective as to be simultaneously adapted by humans. I think sometimes, and this is not a criticism, just, Bucky was maybe, a little bit aggressive in his predictions. And when it came to technology. And I think with I'm not so favorable with humans, technological inventions. That's yeah. I mean, that was my last comment.
Well, and I think that's an important comment. This book was written in 1981.
Right.
And maybe he didn't learn his lessons soon enough, right? But he's basically saying,
Right.
look, I'm going to be ridiculed at every hand. So rather than talk about my ideas, I may either prove them or disprove them before I talk about them. So whether he actually lived that as a principle in his life or not, by 1981, he learned that. I must always reduce my inventions to physically working models and must never talk about the inventions until physically proven or disproven. I think this is a great axiom for any person who has ideas. Keep them close, find experts, prove or disprove your idea. Don't put it out there and be mocked, because that's what will happen. I don't know. That was important to me. Any other comments or questions?
I would just like one more comment, and I think to acknowledge his the family issues that he was encountering as well. That's an important point. It's a story of perseverance, and when you're actually seeking to change, the world, and industries, that perseverance is absolutely necessary. So it was both in his personal life, even though he did consider ending his life at one point. He recommitted himself to helping humanity.
Right.
But overcoming those types of things it's important to know.
And along with his modeling concept, he sought to reform the environment, not the humans. I determined
that was big.
Never try to persuade humanity to alter its customs or viewpoints.
That's a huge point in a world that actually only seeks to alter humans' viewpoints.
Right.
That he was absolutely, and using the environment, which the environment now is mostly electronic. That was a very principled approach. So I think that what he was saying is that either my inventions are good for humanity or they're not, and that takes a act of courage. That's big.
Yeah. Okay, but what has he said in reality? What is the main idea? To me, the main idea is that there is something as a geometry of thought.
Right.
Structure of thought. And he gives idea about apprehension. That is just gathering facts, history. And then sifting them to get patterns, to recognize patterns.
Yeah.
Using those patterns, having understood some laws, to comprehend. and using that to design anticipatorily to solving problems. I think it's very, very powerful.
Yep.
I sought to reform not the individual,
Right.
but the environment. Because you recognize that the environment influences so much
Yeah.
the individual. Remember that the individual is always, you know, the cosine of a sign.
Mm.
The manifestation of the individual is a cosine of a sign. There is the first sign. That is what it is. And then there is a cosine, that is a reaction to it. Right? And the two not happening at the same time is always, you know, at 90 degrees. So it's important for the cosine to do what it's doing, understanding that sine exists.
Right.
So understanding those principles in order to influence our environment through design. Design means knowing the consequences, right? You know, you have a box, there's input, you know what the output is going to be. That is design. And you know how to count that output and how to take it, the result of it, as Steve would say, and go into iteration 2. That's the biggest thing that I take from this is importance of history, of you noting, taking down notes. You talk about doodling. You know what doodling is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I do it all the time.
Yeah. So it talks about doodling, very powerful. And then he set himself, he also talked about something that is big, is that he always sought to channel his energy into something that is going to benefit the largest number possible.
Yeah.
And say,
true.
I'm going to try to put food on the table today. Right? And that is the difference between enterprising and having a job. A job is transactional.
Yeah.
You put in your time,
That's so true.
you are paid, and that's finished. But enterprising is to actually bulk put resources, not knowing, expecting a result, expecting an outcome, but not, that is risky, that you don't know that it will happen or not. But you strong enough. I mean, Warren Buffett say, when he makes decision, when he pull the trigger, it's not because he doesn't have fear. But he say, in spite of a fear, he's learned that his best chance is to pull the trigger anyway. All right.
You complete?
Yep.
I want to reinforce what Manu just said, because Manu actually, to me, when he talked about sine and cosine, that used to go way over my head, and it still does to a great degree. But let me bring what my realization has been to that conversation, because to understand sine and cosine is to understand the topology of physical manifestation. And if I have it right, the cosine is the physical manifestation based on the sine, which is the theoretical or energetic form upon which the cosine manifests. You know, I always saw the sine as the big thing and the cosine is secondary. The cosine is the physical manifestation of the energetic concept. So one way to look at this at cosine is physical, and the way to look at sine is theoretical or energetic or spiritual manifestation. One does not come without the other, but the sine precedes the cosine. and the cosine is the physical manifestation. Now, did what I just say sound good to you, Manu? Because that's kind of what I've learned from you over these last couple of years. I never understood. I'm just barely beginning to grasp this concept of sine and cosine. Did what I just say make sense to you?
Yes.
Oh,
Sine
okay.
is what it is. Because
Yeah.
nobody has ever defined what energy is.
Yeah.
Energy is energy.
Yeah.
Right.
You get is what it is.
Yeah.
The use of energy is the core. Because energy is not what it is just for the sake of being what it is.
Yeah.
It is what it is to be used because it flows.
Right.
It manifests.
Yeah. So I'm going to say it one more time. If one looks at atoms and molecules, one sees a physical manifestation of energy. The energy was the sign, and the physical manifestation, the atom, the molecule, is the cosine. It's the manifestation of the energetic reality.
Yes.
Wow.
And we live so much in the cosine that we forget.
Yeah.
The meta.
Yeah. And this comes back to convex, concave.
Yes.
Right.
Same concept.
That's what I was thinking, actually.
Yes.
Yeah. And this comes back to
the concave only exists because the convex was there and is being deflected and reflected into something where it forms a pattern that you see.
And I'm going to come back, and because this is so essential for me, I'm going to come back and refer to Bucky's circles of irrelevancy.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and we're going to see this manifestation of convex and concave. Circles of irrelevancy. And I'm going to view this as images. And here we go. I've got this done up in several things here, and my computer drives me crazy because here we go. All right, here we go. We're finally manifesting. We're finally getting a cosine of the energy that's in my computer. All right, so here you and I live. You and I live in the lucidly relevant. We live in the blue.
Mm-hmm.
And the macro is above us, and we see it as the concavity. And the micro is below us. That's the convexity. And if you look over here, oh, crud, I don't have it in this particular deal. Oh, yeah, there it is. Look on the right-hand side. Here's where we have the conceptually definite, which is Bucky's play on words. But look how the radiation, the gravity is pushing down, and the radiation is pushing out. So if I have this right, the convex, we're sitting here in the blue. I'm sitting here right in the middle of those two arrows. Gravity is pushing me down, and which is, and then this, and the radiation is pushing out, and they manifest against the concave and the convex. I'm standing on the convex. I hope I said that right. I have another chart. What?
Look into it this way, Steve. If you look at the thing in the right.
Yeah.
Right.
And think about the torus.
Yeah.
In the macro, in the micro.
In the micro.
Yes, all energy flows, comes and pass through. That's a black hole.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it passed through to the other side that we never leave.
Yeah.
That is meta. And is there coming back. It's a torus like this.
So I'm going to give myself an assignment to put a torus on top of it. If my computer were operating, I'm having trouble with my cursor. And if my computer were operating correctly, I would throw a torus over that right now. And the torus would be centered in the blue. And we'd see the top of the torus on the right-hand side on the concave, and we'd see the left-hand part of the torus on the left-hand side, which is the convex. And of course,
Yes,
it's
all you need to do, you see where it has those arrows with the flow. Just
right,
take them and put them in a way that is like that,
right,
getting into that stuff. And then you see it, the torus, it will come in and goes out, you don't know where,
and
come
goes
back
back
again.
around,
It's
comes
just
back
coming
in.
back to you to manifest again.
Right. And it's going in both directions simultaneously.
Yes.
So the
That is
sine
the
and
notion
cosine-
of a sign of
Yeah.
infinity to be that.
Yeah.
Yin
So-
and yang. All of these concepts translate the same thing.
Yeah.
Is that we are living a manifestation of something that is beyond us.
Right. And so following what Manu says, here are the arrows pushing out. So it pushes out and it comes around and then comes back in. And here are the arrows pushing down, and it pushes down and around and comes back in. So it comes in from the top into the bottom and from the bottom into the top from the outside. And that's what manifests. And I have a really good graphic here. Let's hope I can find it. That talks
And your
about,
whole view is a double torus.
and the whole view is a double torus. Exactly right.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go, I don't remember how I had this. I'm going to try for black hole. And because I have a really good graphic that does this down here. Back in the early days, because I had this vision. And here's one concept right here where we talk about this shows one part of the torus with the energy going in and going out. Aha, and here it is right here. Let's see if we can get this thing to open up and respond. Okay, here we go. And so here is the yin-yang, the yin-yang that Manu just talked about.
You're not showing, Steve? Your screen is blue.
Hang on, now it should be black. Do you see it?
Yes, there it is.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. And so I'm going to restart that because I think it's critical. It starts out, here's your black hole and your white hole. This is the energy coming, and we could turn this around and you'd see just a black hole with energy streaming out the top and out the bottom with this disk going around the side. This is showing the energy coming in and around the side. So the green represents for the sake of it, we'll say the green represents the sine and the white represents the cosine. And so when we start this puppy up, I've got things going on in the way here. Okay. Oh, come on. I've really got to, I didn't get my computer in with the guarantee on time to get this thing replaced, and I have trouble with, oh, maybe I can do it with this. There we go. No, didn't move. I'm trying to get my dashboard out of the way. Here we go. All right. And now here is now I've got other crap in the way. Let me move that out of the way. All right, here we go. So watch it again. Here we go. There it is. Boom. It becomes yin and yang. And what we have is a double torus. We have actually a double tetrahedron because the green represents for the sake of our discussion, the sine of the tetrahedron, and the white represents the cosine.
Yeah.
So, and it could be vice versa, but there's the idea. And this is where the yin-yang concept came down for thousands of years. And we're just now seeing these as black holes and white holes, and we're understanding how energy works, how sine and cosine work together. So anyway, I spent $1,000 on that. So I'm delighted that you guys let me share it. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
So black holes is gravity.
Yeah.
Stars, radiation.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
Okay, very cool. All right. I love the fact, to come back where we were, he determined never to try to persuade humanity to alter its customs and viewpoints. His idea was, if you want to win an argument, build a machine that works better.
Mm-hmm.
And when people see the machine that works better, they'll say, I'll buy that product. I'll use that machine. And now all the philosophical discussions go out the window. And I think that's the model for strategy for any creative person, is maybe in your inner circle, talk about your ideas. But there's an old quote by Rumi. Let me see, I got it right here. If you guys know the Persian poet Rumi, he says, here we go. Here we go. Set your life on fire. Seek those who fan your flames. Right? In other words, talk to your inner circle about your ideas. Don't cast your pearls before swine. Anyway, I thought that was a great poem from Rumi. I'll see what I can do to put it in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. And Manu in his chat said, the cosine is the physical manifestation of what is, which is the sine. So we beat that to a horse. But I think here was an opportunity to understand topology. And thank you, Manu, for reaffirming and having the conversation. Okay, we've really hit our limit, and we'll come back and we'll start line 12 next time. Okay, we started a little bit late because we took some time to visit with Anne here before we started. On September 9, 10. And we'll start there on September 9, 10. And that ends our discussion today. And we're ready now for takeaways. And Joe, how are you feeling? And what are your takeaways tonight?
I'm feeling good. Now it's been a long weekend, so this is an amazing end. And thank you again, Manu. I know there's a lot going on for joining. Thank you, Steve, for joining this evening. I think we got some, kind of insights into Bucky's personal life, but also some of the practical tools that he actually used in order to ensure that he looked at reality as objectively as possible. Specifically, obviously, I'm speaking about the chronophile. CJ had a chronophile. It was very helpful for him personally. And I don't know what's going on with it right this moment, but I know that Jeannie is planning to do something. I appreciate a lot of different comments. When we're just getting into the idea of just thinking about the short-term objectives of a company versus the long-term. And so, and it never hurts to go back over the concave and convex conversation. I can't get enough of that. Lastly, I'll just say, well, I'll leave it there. The thinking experience as well is really important for me. Manu, thank you again for joining us. I know you got a lot going on. Congratulations again. It's a big weekend, next weekend. And how are you feeling? What would you like to take away from today?
I feel good. I think the conversation today was really profound. It's very important. Now, my takeaway is simple. Is importance of history, especially long cycle history, to help you to understand. Learn about general principles. And then importance of doing and changing the environment by doing, not by trying to enforce onto people things we must do. So it takes me back again to the say that is education without practice is useless. Practice without education is dangerous. So you need to take educated risks in designing that future, anticipatory design. That is my biggest takeaway here. Steve, how do you feel? What do you think?
Really well said.
Hey, I'm so afraid that that everybody that's traditionally been on this call is going to miss this conversation tonight, because I think I mean, it's taken me how many years I've been on these calls with you, Manu?
Probably
At least 2 years, huh?
probably no, what 2 years? 5 years.
No.
With me?
At least
Yeah.
5. Yes, at
With
least
me?
5 years.
Wow.
Yes.
How time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's true, because yeah, I was living at my other place. So I'm so grateful we had this conversation, and I got to put a kind of I got to dot the I and cross the T, showing my cosine, my yin yang cosine sine invention. And I've got another one that's 3-dimensional. That's a 2-dimensional thing. I've got a 3D one that I just don't, if I had another $1,000, I would get it produced, but it's going to take some money to do it. Here's what a lot of people see back here behind my screen. I've had these puppets back here, and a
Yeah.
lot of people don't understand that. One of them is Mickey Mouse. Now, a lot of people don't understand Mickey Mouse. He's a 2-dimensional reality that I have created. I found a 3D representation of this 2D reality. Most people's experience of Mickey Mouse is 2-dimensional. And of course, and Goofy, to me, and this is one of my favorite things I do with my grandkids and my great-grandkids, is I do a Goofy, I sing happy birthday in Goofy speak, happy birthday to you. And I do this, my grandkids love it. But like most human beings, I hate to say this, most of my life I've been a Goofy. I just been going along, being happy with what I understand about life. And when I started taking these 2-dimensional things and making them into 3D, I started putting depth in my life. And I think that's what we've been doing. That's what I do with Bucky, as I'm putting some depth in my life. This whole concept of sine and cosine is just really critical. So I wanted to introduce my 2-dimensional friends in 3D thing. The big epiphany for me tonight is chronophile. This whole concept of chronophile. I'm writing a book on meditation. I'm calling it Extreme Mindfulness. And it's so funny because I keep trying to simplify the book and get it down there. And I rewrote today and I added in a chronophile. In other words,
Oh, wow.
I've come to appreciate extreme mindfulness, really the differences between mindfulness, meditation, and hypnosis, how they're the same and where they are different. And I came to that over a chronology of my life, where in the 1960s, I learned transcendental meditation and karate or kung fu. Then in the 70s, I learned Silva mind control and learned self-hypnosis and hypnosis. Then in the 80s, I started doing yoga, and I came to a hermetic meditation. And I also came to Vipassana at the end of the 80s. And it's my chronological initiation into those concepts, precepts, and practices that have given me the understanding that I've had today. And I didn't realize why I keep coming back. I try to leave it out because I go to myself, oh, well, this is just egotistical bullshit. And I noticed when I started on Bucky's this chapter 2, I thought, oh my gosh, Bucky's just going into this egotistical recounting of his life. But it's so critical to understand how Bucky went from concept to concept, precept to precept, from grace to grace, to come to his awareness. And now I suddenly realize why I put that chronology back into that writing, Joe. So you're going to get the updated answer to your email to me. What's the best time to meditate? It's going to have a chronophile in there, because I want you to get how I came to what I came. I don't want to just pick the concepts out of context of my growth and expansion and just say, here, add A plus B plus C. No, it's 1 plus 7 plus 9, right? In other words, I didn't get to concept B until I had 7. I don't know. To me, the chronophile thing was big, huge. The other thing to me was when we read from Bucky's that chapter there, and we read item number 6.
Environment.
No, item number 6, where he describes the chronophile, and this is his whole concept of comprehensivity.
Mhm.
I used
Yeah.
to think of comprehensivity as A plus B plus C plus D, but no, it's 1 plus 5 plus 7 plus 10 plus 12. In other words, there's a whole chronology of events that lead to the significance of A, B, and C and D. And if I just write a book that's A, B, C, and D, nobody gets the comprehensivity of A and B and C and D, which comes out of 1 through 12. So I don't know. For me, I'm really huge. I understand comprehensivity like I haven't before because of tonight. And I got to reaffirm and comprehensively understand sine and cosine tonight. Thank you, Manu. And thank you, Joe, because you're willing to have this conversation. And even though I feel guilty talking so much sometimes, to me, this has been profound. And I so appreciate you guys. And I miss all of our other compatriots who, you know, have busy lives and are doing what they're doing. And hopefully they'll take the time to listen to the audio and know that I am aware of them and their spirit, their sign reality in this comprehensive discussion, which reveals a cosine manifestation of their energy with me. So I just, I'm really appreciative, and I'm complete. Any other comments or questions before we go? You guys are
Yes.
great. Go ahead.
Yes. I just kind of realized that, I just realized it now, is that if you don't have a chronophile, the chronophile is a manifestation. I mean, how will I say it? Is an anti-entropic construct,
Yes.
right? To materialize, natural phenomena that are geometric. Because the nature of geometric phenomena, spherical, is that of accumulation. That's how you get patterns.
Right.
So chronophiling is putting things together, what you remember every day, right? Daily.
Yeah.
Because the day are our markers. We say 1, 2, 3, 4. That's why it appears linear. So and then that's how now, by doing that, by mimicking that, this is an invention, eh? This is a design. By doing that, you know that naturally, when things accumulate, they determine patterns. So you are going to, with time, determine patterns. And again, very interesting to me that most of Bucky's writings that have social impact were towards the end of his life. Is it because he knew that before and was scared of saying it, or because of wisdom that come only with that maturity of doing, trying, exploring, and every time having a nice bookkeeping. So bookkeeping, chronophile also is bookkeeping, right?
And
in real estate, if
Absolutely.
you don't book it,
yeah, and it's
a cosmic.
Yeah,
It's
go ahead.
cosmic in a way.
Yeah,
It's cosmic in a way because it's you're capturing. It is accounting, but it's your life, your experience. So yeah, I mean it's a full
accounting.
It's a full accounting. I mean it's almost it tries to, it almost captures everything.
Yeah, it captures everything. So it's not like cooking the books where you just pick this item and this item and come up with a number.
Right.
You know,
Right,
you don't
exactly.
cook books, man. You give an accounting of every damn thing. And in fact, in Bucky's writing here tonight, at the end of number, I thought it was really funny, and I almost mentioned it. At the end of number, what number is it? Oh, at the end of number 6, he writes, it consisted and as yet consists of all of my to and from letters, comma, programs, comma, sketches, comma, memoranda, comma, doodles, comma, etc., plus a few typical bills. He even puts in his bills. And I thought that was really noteworthy at the time, and now it's very significant in the context of this. Any other comments or questions from anybody? Boy, Joe, you look really like you're on the edge of, it's 1 o'clock for you out there, 1:15. So
It's 1 o'clock. It's been a long day since Thursday. Yeah. So
and
Okay, understand you.
it's good.
I got to just say one more thing to come back with what Manu said, because he brought up the word anti-entropic. And listen, I've had big visions about this anti-entropy, because Bucky also says words lead and numbers lag. Now, the universe is entropic, except for certain systems which regenerate in that entropy. And human activity is supposedly anti-entropic. So here's what happens. I hear some words, I get a concept, and then I build a model. The model is based on numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I put all the parts together. The model lags. Now, I used to think there was a problem with lagging. Who wants to lag behind? But then I came to the idea that lagging is where I get understanding. And that's where the model comes. That's where the model comes in, because now I have antitropically created a model by taking words and signs and created a cosine manifestation of all this energy. And now I have a model. The model is anti-entropic. That energy would be dissipating, but oh no, the wood would be rotting, but I built a house. The cement would be melting, but I built a wall. So for a time, something is lagging behind. And so numbers lag, and that's how I create understanding. So instead of just telling people, oh, this is a great idea, this is great, build a model, give them something they can sit in and ponder, and now they get to lag, and as they lag, they have true understanding. So Manu, I had a huge vision on anti-entropy tonight, and I hope that and I thought of this earlier, but did not have the clarity of it until you brought it up in your second takeaway. Thank you very much. Any other comments or questions? Okay, my friends.
Yeah,
I hope
Take
everybody
care.
gets to this
Nice.
recording. This is so powerful.
all right.
All right.
Okay,
Bye.
Yeah.
bye.
Bye.
Take care, my friends.
Get some sleep, Joe.